Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the opportunity to hear you respond to some of those allegations, and you use the word reject. I think you regret perhaps also some of those comments, it sounds like. Not to put words in your mouth, but that's...
I do, Senator.
That's what I sense from today, including your prepared remarks. You could have no better advocate than Joe Lieberman, and he does have enormous respect on both sides of the aisle, and he knows you as a friend and as a colleague, and so you're smart to have brought him with you today.
Thank you.
Graham, I won't talk about. Just kidding, he's fine too, but I do have concerns. You know, this is not a typical ambassadorship. I mean, it's having been to Israel a number of times and met with our ambassador there, let's be frank, in a lot of countries of the world, it doesn't matter that much who the ambassador is. The State Department has taken a bigger and bigger role over the last several decades in foreign policy, and even the White House, you know, plays a big role in certain countries. But this is a really important one, and that person on the ground developing those relationships, I think, is critical for two reasons. One, we do have a lot of divergent points of view here, as you can see. We all are very supportive of Israel, I think it's fair to say. I hope that's true. But there are different approaches to the policy issues. So an ambassador has to be able to bring all these different points of view together and provide counsel to our president and to our Secretary of State and others, National Security Advisor. You'll get a lot of visitors, assuming you're confirmed, from this body, but also from around the world. And so it's a very important role in terms of taking all these different points of view. And so one of my questions for you is, do you think you're capable of doing that? You know, listening to all points of view and being, in some respects, a broker, you know, of those points of view to describe to our administration as to the best approach forward.
Senator, thank you. And yes, I do think I can do that. I think that bipartisanship has always been the hallmark of America's support for Israel. And I'm sorry, as I've commented occasionally to several of the senators I've had the privilege to meet, I want to do everything I can to work with the members of Congress to build upon what is, I think, much more that unites us than divides us on the state of Israel. There are obviously divergent views, and I think all those views need to be considered, and I think they're all made in good faith. And if I am confirmed, it will be a high priority of mine to synthesize and, to the extent, harmonize the views of the Congress, and also to do the same in Israel, because as divided as the United States is, the state of Israel is just as divided, and their governing system is very challenging.
Mr. Friedman, let me continue. The second role that I was going to mention is the one that you're sort of suggesting now, which is, my sense is, the ambassador to Israel typically has been someone who has a personal relationship with the leadership there, and not just the prime minister, but also members of the cabinet and members of the opposition parties, because, as you say, it's pretty diverse and sometimes a little chaotic in their parliament, but you have to have those relationships. And so my question to you is, do you think you can be effective there? And specifically, how would you go about representing the United States of America? Would you be interested in more public comments? Some ambassadors have taken that route. Or would this be more private conversations? And do you feel as though you have relationships in the country beyond the coalition government, beyond the existing parties that are in power, to be able to perform that role?
Well, Senator, on the issue of public comments or private, I happen to believe that with regard to the state of Israel, discretion is incredibly important, and I think public comments can be self-defeating. As you saw yesterday, people hang on every word that is issued on this subject, whether or not the speaker intended that or not. And I think you have to be careful. I think that if there's progress to be made in the Middle East in the peace process, it's through private diplomacy, through forging agreements and coalitions and common interests behind the scenes, and I think that's important. I do understand well the center, the left, and the right of the Israeli Knesset. They're all good people. Many of them have sacrificed. I think they've all sacrificed for their country. Many of them have paid the ultimate sacrifice through the loss of loved ones for their country. You know, people on the left who have lost their families can continue to maintain positions on the left and they're entitled to do so, and they should do so. So it's hard to bring that together, but ultimately this is a Rubik's Cube, and there's a lot of pieces that have to come together. And I do think I know the issues, I know the players, and I do think I have worked in a, albeit much less complicated capacity, but I've worked to develop a skill set that I think will be complementary to that task.
In your law practice?
Yes.
Yeah. One specific issue that I want to raise is BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. And I think the ambassador to Israel will have to be someone who is a spokesperson for the U.S. point of view on this, and will have the ability, I hope, to be able to communicate to the rest of the world what it means, for instance, to have sanctions or boycotts with regard to the West Bank. What would that mean in terms of Israel? What does it mean in terms of the Palestinians?
Sure.
Golan's the other issue that's now, as you know, become part of BDS in some forums. So what are your views on BDS? Ben Cardin and I got legislation passed. We're looking at additional legislation. The Congress is on record now on this issue. We want to do more. But just talk to us a little how you think, as an ambassador to Israel, you can be an effective communicator on the BDS issue and pushing back, combating this, what is, I think, a global effort now that needs strong support from the United States to combat it.
Well, I will be a fierce advocate against the BDS movement, as I understand Ambassador Haley has committed to do as well. I look at the example of SodaStream. I don't know if you're familiar with that company, but SodaStream was an extraordinarily successful company that employed hundreds of Palestinians and hundreds of Israelis and paid them all the same wages and gave them the same benefits. And it was a paradigm of Israelis and Palestinians working together. And because SodaStream happened to be on the wrong side of the green line, they were boycotted throughout the world and had to move. So they moved to the Negev, and Palestinians lost their jobs. This is an entirely self-defeating prospect, not only for Israel, but for the Palestinians as well.
My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so